I started working with very good people, and a lot of work, all the time, very fast. I didn't build in.
I used to be beautiful. Now I feel invisible. These words came from a woman who once had the world at her feet, a woman whose face sold millions of magazines, whose beauty redefined an entire industry, and whose name was whispered with reverence in the most exclusive fashion houses across the globe. But when she spoke those heartbreaking words, she wasn't standing on a runway or posing for Vogue. She was alone, forgotten, and dying. This is the devastating truth about fame. It can make you feel like a god one moment and erase you from existence the next. Imagine having everything the world tells you matters, the kind of beauty that stops people in their tracks. Fame that puts your face on every newsstand, and money most people only dream about. Now, imagine losing it all before you even turn 30. This is the story of Gia Carangi, the woman who literally invented the supermodel and paid for it with her life. Before Cindy Crawford, before Naomi Campbell, before Kate Moss became household names, there was Gia. She didn't just walk runways or pose for cameras. She revolutionized what it meant to be a model, bringing raw emotion and vulnerability to an industry obsessed with cold perfection. But those dazzling magazine covers hid the truth. Behind every perfect shot was a young woman craving what fame couldn't offer: love, stability, and a sense that she was worth more than just her beauty. Let's go back to where it all began. January 29, 1960, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a working-class neighborhood where Gia Marie Carangi was born into what looked like an ordinary Italian-American family. Gia's father, Joe, ran a restaurant while her mother, Kathleen, managed the home. From the outside, they looked like a normal family, but behind closed doors were constant fights, emotional distance, and a chaos no child should ever have to endure.
And after the fact, I realized she was saying goodbye to me. And that's the hardest phone call I ever had to have in my life. Because I was trying to tell her, I love you too, honey.
Then came the moment that would define everything else in Gia's life. When she was just 11 years old, her mother packed her bags and walked out the door. Just like that. No warning, no explanation that made sense to a young girl's heart. Kathleen simply left, and Gia was shattered. That abandonment carved a wound so deep that Gia would spend the rest of her life trying to fill it, searching for the maternal love that had been ripped away from her at such a vulnerable age. Friends remembered Gia as sweet, yet deeply fragile. A girl searching for love in all the wrong places. As she grew older, that longing turned into rebellion. And in high school, she became the bold, fearless girl everyone noticed. She fell in love with rock music, particularly David Bowie, and surrounded herself with a tight-knit group of friends they called the Bowie Kids. They'd spend hours listening to records, talking about art and life, dreaming about futures that felt bigger than Philadelphia. What made Gia stand out even more was her courage to live openly as a gay woman in the 1970s, a time when that honesty could ruin careers. But Gia never hid. She was bold, funny, and magnetic, and her friends loved her for being unapologetically herself. Beneath her wild spirit and laughter, Gia carried a rare magnetism, something deeper than beauty. At 17, driven by that spark and a fearless dream, she left Philadelphia and headed to New York City, the heart of fashion, to chase her destiny. Within months of arriving in New York, Gia was discovered by fashion legend Wilhelmina Cooper, who instantly signed her. From that moment, Gia's life became a whirlwind of fame and opportunity. Her very first professional photo shoot created ripples throughout the fashion world. Photographers couldn't explain it, but there was something about Gia that transcended traditional modeling. Gia wasn't just a model, she was a storyteller who mesmerized the camera. By 1978, she graced every major magazine and worked with top designers. But in 1980, her world collapsed when her mentor, Wilhelmina Cooper, died, marking the start of Gia's tragic decline. Soon, everything changed. Gia began missing shoots, vanishing for days, and losing the professionalism that once defined her. Rumors spread. She'd fallen in with a dangerous crowd and discovered heroin. From there, it was like watching her slowly fade away. Gia herself later said something that perfectly captured this transformation. Life was a party, and then one day, the party was over. Heroin became Gia's escape from pain and pressure, but it consumed her completely. Her beauty faded into hollow eyes and scarred skin, and the industry that once worshipped her turned away, reminding how quickly fame forgets its fallen stars. One incident from this period has become almost legendary in its tragic symbolism. During a photo shoot, a large wind machine was being used to create that perfect windswept look. But Gia, high and unsteady, stumbled directly into the equipment. She cut her arm badly, and blood started spilling onto the pristine white backdrop. The photographer stood frozen in horror. Meanwhile, Gia just stared at her own blood, completely detached, as if she was watching it happen to someone else. That image, beauty and blood mixing together, became the perfect metaphor for what was happening to her life. By 1982, Gia's career wasn't just struggling, it was completely destroyed. She'd arrive at shoots visibly high or not show up at all. The phone calls from magazines stopped. Her agency, the same one that had discovered her and made her famous, dropped her without hesitation. The fashion world that once adored Gia abandoned her. Despite efforts to get clean in Philadelphia, repeated relapses led her to a quiet job at her father's diner, serving coffee to strangers who didn't recognize the once famous supermodel. In 1985, Gia attempted one final comeback. She reached out to Francesco Scavullo, the legendary photographer who had shot her first Cosmopolitan cover back when she was an unknown teenager with infinite potential. Scavullo agreed to work with her again, perhaps hoping to recapture some of that old magic. But when Gia arrived for the shoot, Scavullo was heartbroken by what he saw. He later described her as fragile, polite, but distant, like a ghost of her old self. The photographs from that final session featuring Gia wrapped in white fabric are hauntingly beautiful. Nobody realized at the time that they would be her last professional images. After that shoot, Gia vanished from the modeling world entirely. Back in Philadelphia, Gia's life unraveled, arrested for drug possession, vanishing for weeks, and living in dangerous motels. Though friends and former colleagues tried to help, she pushed everyone away, sinking deeper into isolation. She once told a friend something that breaks your heart to hear. "I used to be beautiful. Now I feel invisible." Fame had consumed her soul and left nothing behind but emptiness. In 1986, Gia entered rehab thinking she had pneumonia, but doctors revealed she had AIDS from infected needles. With no cure and widespread fear, she was left isolated, once a celebrated supermodel, now abandoned and alone in a hospital bed. In those final months, something unexpected happened. Kathleen, Gia's mother, the woman who had walked out all those years ago, came back. She returned to care for her dying daughter, and in that small hospital room, they found a painful but beautiful reconciliation. Gia spent her last days watching old movies, drawing pictures, and listening to the music she'd always loved. On November 18, 1986, Gia Marie Carangi died. She was just 26 years old. Her death barely made the news. There were no tributes, no headlines, no acknowledgement of what the fashion world had lost. The industry simply moved on to the next beautiful face. But years later, something remarkable happened. People began rediscovering her story, recognizing Gia as the supermodel who had it all and lost everything before most people even knew what had happened. Photographers who had worked with her called her a storm that came and went too soon. In 1998, Angelina Jolie portrayed Gia in an HBO biopic that introduced her tragic story to millions who had never heard her name. Today, Gia Carangi is remembered not just for her extraordinary beauty, but for her vulnerability, for being heartbreakingly human in an industry that worships inhuman perfection. She paved the way for every supermodel who came after her. Yet her story remains a devastating warning about the dark side of fame. As one photographer beautifully said, Gia wasn't acting for the camera, she was showing you her soul. And maybe that's why it hurt her so much. From the streets of Philadelphia to the covers of Vogue, Gia Carangi rose as the first supermodel, but her search for love led to a tragic fall, revealing the heartbreak behind beauty and fame.